What's up, everyone? Danny Segura here, and today we are not doing spinning backlick, as you guys can see. I'll be doing a solo live Q&A here on MMA Junkie's YouTube channel. So, welcome everybody. We didn't want to leave you hanging today with an off episode of SBC. So instead, we're having this live Q&A. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You'll be asking questions, I'll be answering them. So the best way to do that is to go over to the YouTube live chat right now, throw some questions on there, and I'll get to them throughout the show. It'll be about an hour. I'll go till about 2 p.m. with you guys. So we can talk about MMA, whatever you want. But obviously, the main focus here will be combat sports. We also have the super chat out there. So if you want your question to be read and get priority over the other questions, you can use the super chat as well, not only to support the channel, but also to get your question in the front of the line. All right. If not, all good. We'll just take the questions as they come, chronological order. So make sure you throw them out there. And yeah, let's have some fun. I'm excited for this. I believe this is the first time I do something like this on the MMA Junkie YouTube channel. Obviously, I do a very similar style show on my Spanish language YouTube channel, Hablemos MMA. And I've done some in English in the past in my English language channel. But yeah, first time here at MMA Junkie's YouTube channel. So I'm excited. All right, people. So lots to talk about. I know we had an off week, and maybe the news cycle seems a little bit slow, but we do have a lot of things in the horizon. Especially, we have a fight night show in Paris that promises a lot of action this weekend, and then beyond that, there's some big fights booked ahead. So excited to chat with you guys. All right. So before we get started, please give this video a thumbs up if you're so kind. If you're not subscribed to the MMA Junkie YouTube channel, subscribe, completely free. And we got you with great content out here. And yeah, let's get this thing going. So let's start here with Adam Rich. Adam Rich from YouTube, because we're also live on Facebook, by the way. Adam says, if both Peña and Harrison win at 307, should Amanda Nunes be the immediate target, parentheses call out, for each? If it's so to believe that Nunes is willing to fight again. So this is a very, very good question, because I think Amanda Nunes is very interested in coming back. I think much like Brandon Moreno did a few months ago, and George St. Pierre did some time ago, fighters need a break, especially the ones that linger around the top, whether it's contender status or champion status. Being at those heights is extremely taxing. Now, the most recent comments that we heard from Amanda Nunes, I believe, were for the title fight between where Pennington won the belt. And she said, yo, you never know. I might be interested in fighting again, but that was also a while ago. We'll see where she's at now. But I do think that if you plug her in today in the division, she is still the best, likely. I think with Kayla Harrison, like, things get a little bit interesting. But I think at least on a perspective from the odds makers, I think she would be favorite to beat every girl there. Obviously, there would be some concerns about the layoff and her age and whatnot, but she left pretty dominant. And I think that dominance still remains. And clearly in women's MMA, she has to be the biggest fight in the sport, right? So that's obviously a fight that both Juliana Peña and Kayla Harrison should want, right? Now, I think for Juliana Peña, makes a lot of sense. They're 1-1, right? So I think a trilogy bout would make sense storyline wise. I think people would be fairly interested in it, especially because those two genuinely don't like each other, and there's real trash talk between the two. And that'd be obviously a big fight. But I think a bigger fight would be Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes. Even though Kayla Harrison, obviously, if victorious at 307, she technically wouldn't be champion. So things get really interesting there. I think ideally for the UFC, you would want to get a champion going, right, in that title fight. No controversy, no ties between Peña and Pennington. And then have Kayla Harrison challenge that. And then ideally for the business, I'm not saying that the UFC wants Juliana Peña to lose, but for the business, I think probably the best scenario would be for Kayla Harrison to at some point claim the belt and then do that Amanda Nunes call out. That fight would be absolutely huge and one of the biggest fights, not only as far as like eyes wise, but also just sporting wise. I think it'll be very, very big, right? I think both these ladies have done a lot for the sport. If at that point Kayla wins a belt, you're talking about a UFC champion and former two-time PFL champion, former two-time Olympic gold medalist. I mean, she would be one of the greatest, right, out there. And obviously, Amanda Nunes, I think there's no debating that she would be the greatest. So I think that'd be sort of the ideal scenario for the business side of things with the UFC. But for Kayla, I think the biggest thing here is getting the belt. So I think, yeah, the Amanda Nunes fight is big, but if she wins, she's going to be calling for the belt. And I think that should be her main call out. For Peña, I do think she could play both cards. Obviously, a fight with Kayla Harrison would be interesting. Both talk on the mic. Both are not afraid to come at each other on the media and on social media. So I think that could get big. But obviously, Amanda Nunes is Amanda Nunes. So I think the biggest fight for Kayla Harrison right now would be the belt. For Juliana Peña, assuming she beats Pennington, it would have to be Amanda Nunes. It would be a trilogy bout. It would settle the score. Amanda Nunes is by far the biggest star of the sport still, even though she's retired. So I think for Peña, she could play both cards. And I think it would be, in as far as legacy is concerned, fighting Amanda Nunes a third time would be much bigger thing than fighting Kayla Harrison at this point. We'll also have to wait and see what the performances show, right? Because if Kayla Harrison goes out there and absolutely runs through Viera and just comes off as a star, as she did at UFC 300, and steals the show with the best performance, she could be at a very much different place than we are seeing her today in. So that could change the fight a little bit. But still, all in all, Amanda Nunes is the biggest fight in the sport. It would make all the sense in the world for Juliana Peña to ask that fight over the Harrison one. For Harrison, a non-championship fight between her and Nunes would be a lot of fun, yes, but I think the belt is still priority number one. At least from my times that I've talked to her, like, that's what she wants to do. She wants to prove she's number one in the world, and she does that by winning a UFC title, not necessarily beating Amanda Nunes. So, yeah, we'll see. Very interesting. I think whatever happens at 307 is obviously going to have huge impact on the women's bantamweight division, a division that for so long was the crown jewel of women's MMA. I don't think that's no longer the case, but we'll wait and see what the results at UFC 307 throw out. And then if Amanda Nunes decides to come back, hopefully, early next year or something like that, I think that division could definitely blow up and could definitely have a nice resurgence, a much needed resurgence. So we'll see. Definitely for those interested in women's bantamweight 307, that's going to be a very, very interesting card, and could change the fate of that division quite vastly depending on the results. But great question here by Adam. Joseph Belotti here, speaking of women's bantamweight. He asked, Danny, do you have an update on when Miesha Tate will be returning to the octagon? And is she the odd woman out in the division? So no update. Let me see what's up on Instagram, because sometimes sometimes fighters post things here and there. If she's training, I want to see kind of where she's at. So peeping her Instagram right now. Oh, wow. Looks like she's a lot into nutrition and training. So she is training, it appears to be. I don't have any update as far as like what exactly she's trying to do with her career. But I mean, another big name, we talk about those legacy names that for so long were sort of the face of women's MMA. She's one of them. And she's more, I don't want to say she's irrelevant sporting wise, because she's definitely a big name. And I think skills wise today, she can hang with some very tough ladies. But I certainly, when we had the conversation on the question prior about Amanda Nunes, Juliana Peña, Kayla Harrison, those do feel like they're right now. They do feel like they're a tier above in terms of competition. Could that change given some positive results for Miesha? Yes. Is it likely? Probably not. I think some fun fights await for her. But as far as like contender status, fighting for a belt, I see it very unlikely. So we'll see where she fits in all this, but certainly a name that's very valued in the company and the sport. And I'm sure a lot of ladies would want to fight her, given the fact that, she's obviously a very well-known fighter and quite popular. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with Miesha as well. She could definitely spice things up at women's bantamweight as well. Cisco Wild says, "Oh hey, it's alive." Yes, it is. What's up, Cisco? We got Crisco. My bad. We got a an OG here. We see you on spinning backlick. Okay, very interesting question. This is more like an industry question. Autopilot 459 says, looking to get into the world of MMA from a journalistic perspective, what is the route that you took? So, from when I came into the sport has changed a lot. But I think, well, let's answer first the question, and then I'll give you maybe some tips into getting into the world of MMA from a journalistic perspective. Um, I I was a fan of the sport since the first Ultimate Fighter, so about 2004. And then along that, I've always been super into media. I used to skateboard and make like little videos and edit videos for my friends in middle school and stuff like that. Skateboarding, and was always into media. I originally wanted to do documentary work, and I've still done some in the space. Maybe not as much as I would want, but it's a very difficult thing to do and very time consuming as well. Something that us in the industry probably don't have a ton of. But anyways, and then yeah, I was just able to marry the two things, MMA and my love for media over time. I went to school. I decided to do journalism because I felt like if I were to do film, it wasn't an industry that was as stable. I feel like there's more of a corporate structure in journalism, even though that could get a little blurry as well. But anyways, I decided to do journalism, and lucky enough, I was able to get a part-time job with my former employer, MMA Fighting, and then I was there for 4 years, and then I joined MMA Junkie 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. In November, it'll be 5 years, and yeah, I originally started doing a lot of social media, and then over time, and video, and then over time, I began to write a little bit more. And nowadays, I would say that sort of I'm pretty well rounded in the sense that I can do a bit of everything. I can do it all in terms of like social media, writing, doing an on-camera interview, shooting, doing a doc, whatever, Photoshop, um, whatever you find in this industry. Like I can more or less do it, live stream, whatever you need. And I found that that's it's good to have one specific skill set, and certainly there's people that are great writers, great interviewers. But I think it's there's a lot of value in knowing a bit of everything. So if I could give you a tip is, dude, try to learn as much things that are needed in this space as possible in terms of like knowing how to handle social media, Photoshop, Premiere, writing. Because at this point, like I feel like in everyone's sort of becoming multimedia journalist. Everyone's doing a little bit of everything, and I think there's a lot of value in that. So if I could give you a tip, sure, have your thing, whatever it is that you like to do. My thing was documentaries, and I do some every now and then, and sort of longer features. Your thing could be writing, your thing could be podcasting, whatever it may be. Certainly develop that, but don't forget the other areas. I think that's very important. But anyways, back to the original question. That's how I got into the sport, and I'm going on almost 10 years now, almost a decade, covering mixed martial arts full time. So I consider myself pretty lucky. It's a hard industry to get into. There's not that many spots. There's a very limited amount of people that do what I do, and I consider myself lucky for being in this position. And it's very competitive, but it's fun. It's rewarding. If you're an MMA fan, I think there's a lot of things that you can enjoy from this job. Obviously, just by covering it and staying on top of it. But yeah, that's. I don't know if you have any further questions beyond that, but that's sort of my initial thoughts on your original question. This is an interesting one. Brian John here. It looks like we got a bit of a theme of women's bantamweight today on this live chat. Brian John wants to know, why don't you think Kayla received a quicker path to the title? So, yeah, crossing over from PFL, obviously is already a star in the sport, or at least like among the hardcores a star. Because if you look at her Instagram account, and I love Kayla, this is not me taking a shot at her, but um, she has like what, like 300,000 followers, which is a good amount, but it's not like she's got millions or anything like that. But among the hardcores, like people know what's up. People know she's the real deal. People know she's among the best. How good is she? We don't exactly know. I think once, if she were to get a UFC belt, those questions could get a little bit more clear. And even then, there's always going to be doubters. What if she versus this style, that style? What about Larissa Pacheco? This, that. But all in all, we know, even if you're a skeptic, you at least have to acknowledge she's among right now the top 10 talents, pound for pound, right, among all weight classes. And yeah, you would think that somebody that had such hype would get an immediate title shot, maybe from entering the UFC, especially in a division that, like women's bantamweight, especially at the time, that's very weak and in need of a big personality, given the absence of Amanda Nunes. Now, remember, Kayla started fighting under PFL at 155 pounds. She had a one-off Invicta fight at 145, and then her most recent bouts at PFL were 145. But we had never seen her at 135. I think that was that was a big factor into not giving her an immediate title shot going into the UFC. We just got to see if, one, she can even make 135, and two, how the hell is she going to look fighting at that weight? Well, back at 300 against Holly Holm, we got that answer. She can make the weight. I'm sure it sucked, but she made it onto the scale on her own will, right? She wasn't carried, she wasn't shaking, she wasn't crying, she wasn't about to faint, as we've seen some other fighters in some very worrisome situations weighing wise. She made the weight, and she had one hell of a performance. She dealt fine with the media, with fan pressure, with being on a huge event, fighting a legend like Holly Holm, a former UFC champion. She's clearly made for this. Now, I get not giving her a title shot going into the UFC for all the reasons that I just mentioned. What I am surprised is that at UFC 307, Pennington is defending the title against Juliana Pena and not Kayla Harrison. I think that is a missed opportunity there. I think you had to have thrown Kayla Harrison in there for the title. And I know Juliana has a big personality, and I know that she's highly ranked, but her recent record is also not that great. And I know she dethroned Amanda Nunes as well, which is obviously an incredible feat. But her record is her recent record, even though she's highly ranked, it's not like it's stellar, right? She's coming off a loss. Last time she fought was in July 2022. That's a long ass time. So you're telling me after over 2 years of being inactive, you're going to get a title shot? That to me is kind of bizarre. Really, she, off a loss, 2-year layoff, and then she's getting a title shot when Kayla Harrison proved she made the weight, competed at 300, beat a former champion in Holly Holm. I think that would have been the move. So I don't get why we see today the UFC 307 card in the manner that we see it, in terms of Kayla Harrison not fighting for the belt and Juliana Pena challenging for the belt. And there's no hate for Juliana Pena. I think she's a great fighter, but I think the obvious move was here, Kayla Harrison. So I think Juliana is probably very well liked in the promotion. I think if the UFC wanted to skip her, they could have easily justified that. I don't think there would have been much uproar from the fan base, given the things that I just mentioned. I think they like her a lot. I think they probably promised her that they would get her a shot at the belt at some point, and they want to do her right and kind of lived up to their end, and that's what we're seeing. I think the UFC also has a lot of faith in giving Kayla Harrison another fight, and then sort of roll the dice, because she very well could lose to Ketlen Vieira, and then all of a sudden that party is somewhat spoiled. She could always get back on the winning track, but she is, in her mid to late 30s, so that'll probably be a little bit more difficult. But given what they've seen, I think they feel very comfortable taking the gamble. If not, I think they would have just plugged her right away into a title shot. But yeah, that's the way things worked out. It is surprising. If I were running things over there, which obviously I'm not, I would have done things differently. But here we are. We'll see what those results throw and what kind of fights we get after that. But yeah, I'm equally as surprised, Brian, as far as why the UFC chose not to give Kayla Harrison a title shot. Ooh. Um, Forrest Daniels says, besides Topuria versus Holloway, what are your top three announced fights you're looking forward to the most? Great question here. Well, number one is that one, but obviously, excluding that one, I would say the Chandler Oliveira fight. I'm kind of happy to see Chandler move on. Chandler, I know he gets some hate from the fan base. I don't know if Forrest Daniels, you're one of those, but look, he's not everyone's cup of tea as far as like how he presents himself and sort of his personality within the sport, and that's fine. I'm not telling you have to be a fan of his, but certainly what we can all respect and appreciate is his fighting style, right? There's very few fighters that do what he does. And it's really been a shame that we haven't seen him fight in almost 2 years, considering that he's at the very end of his prime. I know he works out a ton and he's always in shape, lives a very healthy lifestyle, but still, those things can only slow down aging so much. And 155 is stacked, man. 155 is such a great division. We easily could have gotten one or two fights out of him in that span that he's been inactive waiting for that Conor fight. And we probably would have gotten fight of the year contenders, right? Keeping in mind how he fights and the type of matchups available in his division. So it's been a shame. So I'm excited to see him back finally. And look, if you didn't see that first title fight between Chandler and Oliveira, it was amazing. It was they have a great contrasting styles. They both move forward. They both risk. It was a great fight, and I think the second one should be just as fun, if not even more fun. Obviously, there's a less at stake given they're not fighting for a belt, but I think that's a fantastic fight. Two, I would throw out there Robert Whitaker versus Khamzat Chimaev. Now, I think that one, from an entertainment point, is not the most exciting fight out there. I think it could be an interesting fight, technically speaking, but I don't think it'll be a fight sort of like the Chandler Oliveira fight, or I mean, it could turn into that, right? You never know. We saw what Gilbert Dudinho Burns and Khamzat were able to do. In fact, I was actually live for that fight. That was in Jacksonville. But I think probably the expectations for a fight of the year contender lie more in Oliveira and Chandler than that one. But I still think it's a great fight. And more importantly, dude, I just want to see Khamzat Chimaev like either sink or swim at this point, right? Like, we clearly know he's good. We clearly know he's a star, but he's yet to make that step. There's been injuries, canceled fights. I don't know how much there's truth into the visa issues, this and that, but it's really been sort of very anticlimactic. His career, he made a name for himself for fighting anybody, anywhere, fighting, what was it, twice in like 10 days, and all of a sudden we get a very inactive fighter. And keep in mind, he was in the UFC before Alex Pereira, and I remember when Pereira came in, he was like, "Oh, easy fight, I can run through him, this and that." He was also talking poorly about Dricus du Plessis, this and that. And it just seemed like at that time, this guy was going to be the reigning champion. It was inevitable that he was going to win the belt and he was going to stay champion. And we've seen all these other careers flourish. Look at what Poatan has done since entering the UFC compared to what Khamzat Chimaev has done. If you would have told us that at the beginning of their careers in the UFC, it would have been hard to believe. But yeah, here we are, a fighter that's barely fought, a fighter that's still a little bit untested. I think you can poke holes at his UFC resume, and a lot of it is not fault of his own, but some of it is. And at this point, if that fight with Robert Whitaker were to go down, there's no denying, like, we know exactly where Khamzat Chimaev is, win or lose. I think we all respect Robert Whitaker. We know exactly where he's at, what kind of level of fighting he brings to the table. And he's quality. He's quality. If you get past Robert Whitaker, ugly or a clean performance, you're good and you're bound to fight for the belt. So yeah, I just want to see at this point, like, where this Khamzat Chimaev project is going to lead to, because I am a little bit tired about this sort of pending matter that we have in 185 with him. We still don't know what his upside will be. And yeah, he's just been a real mystery. And sometimes we talk about sort of the biggest what ifs. If he pulls out of this fight, and knock on wood, there's a wooden desk, by the way, and for whatever reason, he's not able to get his shit together, I think this will be like one of the biggest what ifs in the sport. I think after he got COVID, he became a different fighter. Or at least so we think. Certainly, I think the expectations on him have dampened a lot. We'll see if he's able to regain that with the Robert Whittaker fight. I mean, if there's a fight at 185 that can sort of bring all that back, it's that fight. So we're gonna find out. So that fight I'm very interested about, but it's more of a curiosity. Like, I want to know. It's not necessarily that I'm so excited about the action, although that fight could be an absolute banger. We'll see. What else? What else am I looking forward to? So that's two. If I had to throw another one out there, that's currently booked, man, it's got to be Francis Ngannou versus Renan Ferreira, right? I know this is not UFC, but PFL is arguably no. I think that's safe to say it's the biggest fight they've ever booked. I am also equally curious, just as I was talking about Khamzat Chimaev, I'm equally curious to see what Francis Ngannou brings to the table years away from his last MMA fight, coming off a knockout loss against Anthony Joshua, and then against a Renan Ferreira that might not be all that well known. But look, I've interviewed the guy. First of all, the guy's massive, and I've seen him fight now that I've been covering PFL, and I've had the pleasure of covering a few events in person. Dude, the dude's legit. He might not be like a stud wrestler or have like super good jiu-jitsu, but he can crack. He's not afraid to swing. His technique's decent. He's got crazy power. Insane athlete as well. It's completely not out of the realm of the possibilities that he wins a quick first round KO over Francis Ngannou. Now, if I had to pick a fight, I'm gonna go with Ngannou, but I think it's I think a lot of people are sleeping on Ferreira. I don't know what the odds are, but depending on what the odds are, it wouldn't be a bad idea to sprinkle some money on Ferreira. I'm excited for that fight. It should be a complete banger. I'm maybe even more excited for that fight than the Stipe Miocic versus John Jones one. At least in my eyes, it certainly has more meaning sporting-wise, even though the UFC belt is up for grabs in that one. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe my excitement level changes once that MSG card rolls around. But as of this point in time, the Ngannou Ferreira fight is probably the heavyweight title fight that sort of has most of my attention to it. So yeah, I would say those three, but there are some other good fights booked. Just real quick, a lot of people sleeping also on Pereira Roundtree. I think this is gonna be a lot of fun. So yeah, I would say those three: Ngannou Ferreira, Chandler Oliveira, and Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker. Those are my fights right there. Great question, Forrest. Thank you. Yeah. We got something for the super chat, and it says, "Dan, we partied at Miami ATU Records in 2022." I remember that. Rest in peace, ATU Records. We'll give them a little shout out. Great music. No longer with us, but it was a great place. Let's see what else we got here. Ooh, Killian Martin says Talbot versus Rosa. I'm assuming you're talking about Raul Rosas Jr., right? I've seen that fight be thrown around. Obviously, you're pitting two young prospects against each other. But by the way, that fight is not booked. This is a hypothetical question, just for those maybe tuning in and they'll start freaking out about the booking of that. No, it's not booked. But I've seen some people throw that idea. But I think name value is an interesting fight. Name value, it certainly would jump out wherever you put it on whatever card, whether it's a pay-per-view or a fight night. But I think that fight it's very ill advised, and I mean it for Raul Rosas. And I love Raul Rosas. I interviewed him on my Spanish YouTube channel last week, and we've had one story, and I got another coming on MMA Junkie, obviously translated to English. I think he's great. I do think that he has a lot of promise. I think some people are down on his ceiling, but I do think it's quite high. But dude, he's 19 years old. Talbot, I think he's like in his early to mid 20s. He might be like 25. Let me look that up. He is 26 years old. That is a 6-year difference, especially at that stage from 19 to 26. Not only do you change a lot physically as an athlete, but I think in MMA development, you change a ton throughout those years. I mean, for most people, that is an amateur career to maybe knocking on the doors of a contender series. It is a big jump in terms of stages of your fighting career. So I would not book that fight at all. I mean, unless you're trying to sort of burn Raul Rosas, I think you do him dirty by giving him that fight. I would heavily pick Talbot to win that fight. I think obviously Raul has an edge on the floor, but still the gap on the feet is just so wide. I don't think that's a good fight. I think you gotta let Raul Rosas simmer a little bit. And the story that I wrote recently on MMA Junkie was precisely him calling out and wanting to fight a top 15 fighter. Now he did call out a top 15 fighter after his fight in his post-fight interview. But I kind of asked him a little bit more about that interview, and I'm like, "Do you feel like you're ready? Because you are 19. Like, there's no rush. You have so many years ahead. Like, why not keep logging in experience rather than jumping to and fighting a top 15 fighter?" And yeah, he did not agree with me at all. He was like, "No, I like challenges. I want to be tested, and I feel like I'm ready. And if I'm not ready, I have a great team around me, and I will figure out a way to be ready for that date and that opponent." And I certainly respect the ambition. I certainly respect that. Part of me also thinks that he is a little bit in a rush, not because his days in MMA are numbered and he's going to retire at 25, as he said. He says that, but I don't believe it. I think he'll stick around for a while. But I do think his days at bantamweight are numbered. And he has told me in the past that each time he fights, the weight cuts get a little bit more difficult. And then he does see himself fighting at 145 eventually. Like that's inevitable. And so far, he's put in a lot of work at 135. What, he's got a 4-fight win streak going on right now, or is it 3? Let me pull that stat up. Also crazy. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page on UFC 306. It's crazy that he doesn't have a Wikipedia page. So here we'll go with Topology. Shouts out to Topology. Great record keeping site here. No, so he's on a 3-fight win streak right now. And look, he's looking good. I mean, there's no denying he's been getting better, especially in his striking. He feels a little bit more comfortable defensively, and obviously his offensive grappling is already pretty formidable. But yeah, I do think that he's put in 4-1 at 135 pounds, right? For most fighters at that weight class, maybe it doesn't get them a ranked opponent, but it does get them pretty close to it. Maybe another opponent that could get them a ranked opponent. And if he wants to build a great legacy, it would have sucked to do all this work, get close to the rankings, or even just crack the top 15 and then be forced to move up by your natural growth of your body to move up to 145 and not start over, but kind of really clean slate and do things again to climb the rankings. Yeah, it's very interesting. I do think he's a bit, that's what I feel, at least. I'm not sure. I would have to ask him again for that, but I do feel like he's in a little bit of a rush because he knows at 135 he's not going to stick around for that much longer. So F it, why not try your hand with some of the ranked fighters and see how far you can go and maybe even get a title shot before you move up to 145. So I totally get that, but I do think you want to slow roll him here. I do think that he is a long-term project, and I've seen so many prospects throughout my time covering the sport, and even as a fan, get rushed, and one loss can really change the fate of a career. So hopefully that's not the case with Raul, and at least from what I've gathered, listening to some of the scrums and comments that Dana White has had on him, they like him and they do not want to rush him. At least that's the feeling that I get from some of the things they've said about him. You don't hear Dana White or the matchmaker saying, "Oh yeah, this guy future champion by 2025, this and that." Like they're definitely giving him his time to breathe and develop as a fighter. And I think that should be their priority than, hey, let me just get as much as I can done at 135 while I can. So yeah, interesting fight name wise, but no, Killian Martin, not about that life, man. I'm not about that life. I think it'd be a bad matchup for him at this point. All right, let me see if we have anything popping from the super chat. Now I'll continue with the other questions. Cool. No, we're good. Um, Forrest Daniels, what kind of UFC event would you like to see at the Sphere next? A UFC history theme, a 4th of July theme, etc. That's a great question. I think a regular card cannot be at the Sphere because the Sphere, you have all those screens to storytell. I mean, that's essentially what you're doing. And you need a story. For Mexican independence, they had a story, and they were able to tell it through the Sphere. 4th of July, I'm not really sure. I mean, you probably could, right? But and I might catch some heat for this, and maybe I have my perspective is quite different because I am an immigrant in this country. I was born in Colombia, and I wasn't born here. I'm from somewhere else. English is my second language, but I I do feel like when we see fighters from other countries, like the entire country gets behind them. Like Chito Era, for example, he's a star in Ecuador. All the Mexican fighters, they got Mexico behind them. Even Conor McGregor in Ireland, and we see, Zhang Weili in China, this and that. But for the U.S., it's a lot more fragmented. You could be a fighter from the U.S., and unless you're fighting in like Russia against the Russian or something like that, if you're fighting in the States, you have fans because they like you and who they are as a and who you are as a personality, but not necessarily much of like, oh, this is an American, I'm gonna go support him just because. We see a little bit perhaps more, I don't know if the right word would be nationalism, but maybe for fighters from other countries, maybe because there's less representation, right? There's so many American fighters and not that many fighters from, say, Ecuador. So like there's that representation. I'm not sure what the answer is, but not sure if a 4th of July card could be a thing, but maybe. Um, I think certainly an anniversary card. Like, remember when the UFC had that 20-year anniversary card, or was it 25, where Korean Zombie fought Jair Rodriguez and gave us that spectacular knockout, and they brought the retro UFC logo back. And it was in Denver, which was the beginning of where the UFC kind of started. And yeah, they kind of had like a throwback with all the graphics and stuff. You can do something like that and then tell the story of UFC evolution up to that point. And you can even plug in certain fighters that are still around. This would be a poor example because he's not in the company anymore. Arlovsky, okay, fine, but like fighters of that caliber in terms of like telling a story that could maybe, for example, like a Jim Miller that was like at UFC 100 and 200 and 300 as well. Maybe have some legacy fighters in there. Maybe that wouldn't be too bad, and then kind of tell the story of the UFC. That could be interesting. The Sphere could lend itself for that. But as far as like a yearly thing, let's just have some fights in there, because like, what are you going to throw on the screen? Like, what's going to be the theme? I don't know. That's certainly, maybe. I mean, I'm obviously just answering this question right now immediately. I'm sure if you get some producers and some bright minds to kind of digest that and really think about it over months, maybe they can come up with an idea, a project. But it certainly feels like if you want to go to the Sphere, you have to have some sort of theme. So yeah, I expect probably another UFC event there. I don't think it's a one and done, as Dana White says. He said a lot of things are one and done, and it hasn't been the case. I think they go back to it. Look, I had a lot of friends that don't care about MMA were asking me about the Sphere. Oh, were you there? Oh, this and that. It certainly made a lot of headlines. And I think giving the right fights, given the right circumstances, a trip to the Sphere does make sense. So I think maybe in a few years we'll see another one out there. Also, we I forgot who, but and I apologize for that, but on the last SBC show reacting to 306, somebody had made a point how they got a lot of things down in terms of the production because it was a first ever. It probably, it's the reason why it pushed that $20 million in terms of the production value of it. But I think if they were to do it again, I mean, they already know what to do, what not to do, and I think it wouldn't be a much cheaper operation, but it would be a less of a headache. And certainly I can see them saving, some money compared to the first one, just because they've been there before. They've done the show. They know what it takes, what they need. And yeah, I think it'll be a much better, if this was at all stressful for them, I think it'll be a much smoother operation for them a second time out. Josh Wallace, great picture by the way, cute dog. Um, he says, "Do you think Umar will have to do one more fight before he gets a title shot? If I'm not mistaken, Dana hasn't named the next one in line after Merab won." Well, Dana, unless it's like a clear number one contender, Dana doesn't really do that much, right? He always says, we're going to meet with the matchmakers on Tuesdays. We're going to meet with the matchmakers on Tuesdays. And sometimes it seems so obvious that there's somebody up next, but he still refrains from kind of saying that out there, because if it's out there, they'll clip it and all of a sudden it's almost as if he made a promise. And if that fighter gets injured or they need that champion to defend the belt in a certain card, or they need whatever they need, they have a little bit less sort of wiggle room there to do things once you have a fight promised. So I do think it's going to be Umar. I think there's an argument for Davison Figueiredo. I made a case for him a few episodes back on Spinning Back Click that, I do think Umar is the more deserving. I do think Umar has the best shot at beating Merab compared to Figueiredo, obviously. But Umar's young. Umar's very young. Figueiredo is 36 years old, a bantamweight that's quite up there, and it's actually impressive that he's looking the way that he's looking. He could sell you a fight. He's a former champion. He's not afraid to get on the mic and say some wild shit and sort of hype up the fight. Why not give him a fight? You can put that in Brazil, and kind of have that happen since you can have that now. I don't know if a year or two down the line at 37, we're going to get the same Davison Figueiredo. So get him now while he's winning and he's looking good. But it seems that Umar, he's deserving wise. He probably trumps Figueiredo at this point. And look, I think a great indication is at the Sphere, right? They had him not ringside, but cage side, and they put the camera on him. I remember when Josh Emmett was trying to get his title fight after beating Kelvin Kadar. That was before who got the title shot before him? Somebody got the title shot after him, but a lot of people felt that he deserved the opportunity. He went to the UFC event where the 145-pound title was being disputed, and he thought he was going to be next. They didn't even put the camera on him, dude. They didn't even. And I know that was a big disappointment for him, and that was a big tell by what the UFC is trying to do. And I forgot exactly who fought for the belt after that. Was it Jair? No, because then they fought for the interim. It was somebody else. But anyways, my point being is all signs point that it's going to be Umar. And I think Dana and the UFC just haven't said anything because they don't want to make any promises yet, because things can change. This is a very wild sport. But I do expect that Merab's next title fight is going to be against Umar. I'd be very, very surprised if it isn't. All right. All right. We got Esteban Ricardo Fernandez Mateo. He's Hispanic when you got like 50 names on your name. And he says, ¿Alguien más vino por Hablemos MMA? Yes, sir. We got an Hablemos fan over here. Thank you. Thank you, Esteban, for your support. You're probably tripping out because you're used to seeing me speak Spanish, but no, I can do this in English as well. Let's see. Ooh, I don't know if I want to answer that question. Okay, I think I can tiptoe around it. Ashul Jubilee's gas station. Ashul. In your opinion, who are the most overrated fighters in the UFC right now? All right, so these people put their health on the line. It's hard to have sort of that type of comment. Not that I want to restrain myself from saying something, but I just simply don't want to offend anyone in the industry. Sometimes that's inevitable, but sometimes that can come off as disrespectful. But I'll say this: not that they are overrated, but that I'm not sold, which is almost the same thing, but maybe just packaging it in a nicer way. Shara Bullet, man, I am not sold on him. Is he cool looking? Yes. But I am not sold on him. Besides his aesthetics, which obviously look badass, and that's why he's going to be a bad guy in a new Neeson movie. Um, I don't see there a future champion, and I don't see a top 5 guy. Could that change in the future, and he can evolve as a fighter greatly? Sure, but at this point in time, he's been long enough in the sport where we should see an evolution. Like, it's not that he is who he is at this point. I'm sure there's some evolution and some growth to be made, but more or less, like, you are seeing somewhat of the final project. He's not really a 22, 23-year-old prospect where you go, okay, well, his formative years are yet to come. How old is Shar Bullet? Shar Bullet, I believe he's like 30. Exactly 30 years old. Yeah, he turned 30 in May. So he almost is like a finished product at this point, and I think that he's good. He's definitely UFC worthy. I think he belongs in the UFC. He's UFC quality, but yeah, I kind of don't get the hype on that fighter. I don't see a promising skill set in terms of a championship belt. And look, I can say the same thing about a lot of fighters. It's only one person can be champion per division, right? And it's extremely difficult to do. We've seen tons of great fighters that are world's best, and they don't even win a title. So yeah, no knock on him on that, but even his fighting style, like, I don't think it's necessarily boring, but I don't think it's extremely exciting, kind of like a Korean Zombie. Like, okay, you knew that guy was probably not going to be champion, but hell, he's a very unique fighter and stands out because of his fighting style. And there's other fighters that I can name along that sort of line. His fights are good, but I don't understand what the hype is, but yeah, that's just my personal opinion. But could that all change? Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe in his next fight, he shows off a completely different skill set and improvement, and all of a sudden, we're talking about him in a light that's him as a title contender. That could definitely be a thing, but I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's likely. Let's see what else we got here for questions. Rakid says the following: What's your thoughts on Aspinall being the backup of UFC 309, since neither Jones or Miocic will fight him if there is an injury? Yeah, I have a hard time imagining that Jones or Miocic will fight him if either fighter drops out. I think if either fighter drops out, that fight is just canceled, postponed, depending on the injury. Maybe they can do it for the last pay-per-view of the year. But yeah, I don't see them taking. Look, if neither wanted, where at least John Jones, it sort of seems right, because I'm kind of accusing him of not wanting to fight him, but we don't know that. But it appears he doesn't want to fight him on a full camp. So on a short notice camp, I have even bigger doubts that he will. And as far as Miocic, I don't think he takes it either. I think it's John Jones or bust. It's either or, and the same thing could be said about John Jones. So sure, have him as a backup. Thank God he doesn't have to cut any weight, so at least there won't be any effort. Obviously, I hope that he shows up in shape if he is indeed the official backup, and because you never know. But if I was a betting man, I don't think he fights either guy at UFC 309. I don't think that happens. Tariq says, "What do you think? And will and when Zhang Weili become double champ?" I mean, that would be a fantastic fight. Valentina Shevchenko versus Zhang Weili. Sign me up. I'm all for that fight. But I do think Zhang Weili has some business to take care of at 115. And I've been a little bit. I think her title reign has a bit underwhelming, right? Like, we expected that there was going to be this huge explosion, and maybe the distance. We are so far away from China here in the Americans, at least from where I'm broadcasting in Miami. Obviously, there are certain things that just don't translate over time and over time zones and distance. And I'm sure that she's a huge star there, but it just, I don't know, it feels different. Like, for example, and again, maybe I'm biased because I speak Spanish and I've been covering this fighter, but I feel like the American public has sort of felt the weight of Spain in Europe on Ilia Topuria, like the way they are supporting him everybody has sort of felt it. You might not understand it to the fullest if you don't speak the language, if you're not from there, if you don't live in Europe, because you're a lot more distance to things that are happening there. But I do feel like some of it has translated. And again, maybe it's me because I'm biased because I am in tune with that. But I feel like the American public has received a little bit of that rub, or at least gotten a look at it. With China, I don't feel the same. Maybe there's somebody out there that speaks the language or covers the area more specifically that could tell me I'm wrong. But yeah, I don't know. Like this huge superstar that was gonna blow up. I mean, she's got the title. She's defended it, and I don't know. That division kind of seems a bit down right now, and she hasn't been very active as well, which has been disappointing. Um, yeah, I would like to see more activity from her. Log in some badass finishes if possible, and then if Valentina's up there still with the title, I think that'd be a very big fight you could make. Why not? But I would pick Valentina to beat her, to be honest. That'd be my pick. So no, I don't see her being double champ, but you never know. Why not? Um, Ben Van Getzel says the following. Last time Fiziev fought was 365 days ago. So we're on his 1 year anniversary. Who should fight him in his return? I'll pick Pimblett. Nah, I would not pick Patty Pimblett. I think they're on very different trajectories at this point. But I mean, if you want to see Pimblett lose and bad, sure. I mean, that could be a thing if you want. But let's see here. Let me pull up Fiziev's record because sometimes um I even forget who he's fought. The good news is that it's really easy to play matchmaker with him, not only because he's a great fighter and an exciting one, but he's also in a great and exciting division. So very easy here. So he's coming off 2 consecutive losses, losing to Justin Gaethje and Mateusz Gamrot. His last win came in July 2022 against former UFC champion Rafael dos Anjos. Look, give me Fiziev versus the Tarantula, man. Give me Fiziev and Jalen Turner. Why not? I think that'd be very exciting. Or give me Fiziev and shit. Maybe a loser of Oliveira and Chandler. That'd be interesting. Or Fiziev and um, Joel Alvarez, who not so long ago dismantled his opponent. What was it at in Abu Dhabi? So that could be a lot of fun as well. That'd be a really fun fight too. So yeah, give him a striker. I think at this point to get him back, just give him a striker. There's a lot of fun fights for him, and if he gets some momentum, then we can start talking about contention. But as of now, he just needs to be back and be putting on great fights. But yeah, Fiziev versus Jalen Turner, that'd be a lot of fun. Anshul asked the following. Do you think Alexa Grasso fights the winner of Rose versus Blanchfield next or someone else? Great question. That division is absolutely the best division right now in women's MMA. I think there's very little to argue against that. Um, Obviously, the next one's probably going to be Manon Fiorot. She's deserving. She's killing it. And she was the backup for that fight. I would expect the winner between Blanchfield and Rose Namajunas to be the next. But because there's a bit of a line, because Valentina just fought Alexa, and you would assume that they would need a break, then a training camp, and then that fight against with Rose and Blanchfield is in November. Maybe the winner does have to fight one more time. If that's the case, I don't know what the health of Macy Barber is, but I would throw Macy Barber in there, and I would actually put Alexa Grasso against somebody else. I'd like to see Alexa fight, get sort of kind of like a rebound fight before getting a fight that's kind of like a number one contender fight. Because if you beat Blanchfield or Rose Namajunas, at that point, like you're fighting for the belt again. So maybe the winner just waits a little bit and fights the winner of Valentina Shevchenko versus Fiorot. And maybe we do get a rematch between Macy Barber and Alexa Grasso. I think that's a fantastic fight. A lot of action. There's a little bit of bad blood in there. And I feel like once you get some interviews going and stuff like that, maybe that could turn into a little rivalry. And yeah, that fight would be badass. So I'm more towards that fight, Alexa Grasso and Macy Barber, than the winner of Rose and Blanchfield. Lazy Bid goes, hey, let's go, Danny. What's up, Lazy Bid? Another SBCOG around here. What else we got here? Crisco Wild says, why do you suppose Renato Moicano took the fight with Benoit Saint-Denis rather than chase a higher ranked opponent? Does Moicano value the main event of Paris more than a shot at climbing the ranks? The time frame worked for him. He is fighting somebody in the rankings. It is a main event. I think there's a lot for him to gain. I mean, he's entering this fight as an underdog. Keep that in mind. And it's not like Moicano is like super highly ranked. This is not like a top 5 giving an opportunity to number 13 or something, as we saw with Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez. This is more of an even fight in terms of their positioning in the rankings. Moicano ranked right now at 11 on the UFC official lightweight rankings, and Benoit Saint-Denis just one spot behind him at number 12. So I think this fight makes sense. And I think Renato Moicano probably realizes that if he wants to get the Michael Chandlers, the Dan Hookers, the Dustin Poiriers, the Justin Gaethjes, the Charles Oliveira, the old guard that still populates the top 5 and just outside of it, he needs to beat somebody like Benoit Saint-Denis. After that, he can start asking for those names. At this point in time, I think it's a tough sell. Maybe it could have worked out for him, but I think it would have been a hard sell for him. So, no, I think this opportunity is perfect. And I think the winner here, whether it's Benoit Saint-Denis or Moicano, should get one of those sort of legacy names that I just mentioned. Certainly, they're up there, especially if it's Moicano, man. Moicano, I feel like he's kind of had a resurgence in his career. I remember years ago, I forgot for what card it was. I was still working at MMA Fighting. It was like 2019 or 18. It was a card at the Barclays, and he was fighting there. And back then, they used to do the media days much different than now. Now they just have sort of a table, and then they bring a fighter one by one, and everybody asks questions, scrum style. Before, it was a giant room, and they would split the card into 2, usually blue corner and red corner, and they would line up a bunch of chairs, and each fighter would have a banner with their name and a station. And they would give you, I don't know, a couple hours to walk around, and you could interview whoever you want. Some fighters would do scrums. You would get several reporters there. Some would be able to do one-on-ones. And I remember Moicano at that time, and I hope he doesn't mind me telling this story, but because I'm giving him props here. Like, nobody wanted to interview him. Like, I remember Joseph Benavidez was on that card, and a lot of people were making a line to speak to him. And yeah, he was just kind of standing there. I think he did some interviews, but he wasn't nearly as popular. And I feel like he's always been a personality, but probably a language barrier there didn't allow him to really show who he was. He's also probably a little bit more comfortable in camera and more comfortable in his skin now that he's got more UFC experience and around media and stuff. But yeah, it's crazy how some of these fighters, and I think Jorge Masvidal is another great example, how people start to get them at a very late stage in their careers. And it's a little bit unfortunate, but at least I'm glad it's happening. There's fighters that retire and they never maybe get the love from the fan base, but I'm happy to see the love. Renato Moicano getting the love. And look, if he wins here, and you would have to suspect that if he wins, it's going to be an insane fight. I mean, nobody runs through Benoit Saint-Denis without some damage. So you expect this fight to be a bit of a rough fight for either guy, win or lose. And dude, if Moicano wins, I think he's going to come off as a superstar. And you bet he's going to have a badass post-fight interview. And he could really unlock a big name, and maybe even Paddy Pimblett. I mean, you got Pimblett saying he wants to fight him. Moicano wants to fight Pimblett. That'd be a big-ass fight. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens this Saturday, but that's definitely a very exciting card. And I'm looking forward to that fight. It should be a good one. A very underrated fight in terms of the action. I feel like so the hardcores know it's a good one, but low key it could be something special. We'll see. All right, let's see what else we got here. We're creeping into the hour, so let me see if there's anything on the super chat. Just to make sure we're not leaving anybody out that contributed to this great channel. Yeah. All right. So we reached the hour mark. So I'm going to sign off here. But before I sign off, please do us a favor. Give this video a thumbs up. It helps a lot with the channel and the algorithm. It's a great way in supporting this channel. If you like what we're doing at MMA Junkie, it's a great way to support it. Just give it a like. It's literally one click away, completely free. I see a lot of people as well consuming the content, and yet they're not subscribed to the channel, which I find ridiculous. Again, all free, great content. We provide interviews with the top coaches, fighters, uh, the best and the most well-known people here in the game, and we give you great analysis every Monday as well on Spinning Backlick. Plus, we cover live weigh-ins, as you just saw with Cold Coffee and his stream of the Contender Series weigh-ins, et cetera, et cetera. We got you covered. MMA Junkie's got a full coverage here of the sport. So yeah, guys, subscribe, like, leave a comments as well what you thought about this live. Maybe we should do more of these. And yeah, we'll see you next week at 1 p.m. for an episode of Spinning Backlick. So see you guys then, and take care. Peace.